My name is Stella Elizabeth Bullard Pritchett. I was born July the 7th, 1931, in a small town called Tahiti that was near the foothills in the Manzana Mountains, near Mountain Air, New Mexico. My great-grandparents, the Hulls, I really don't know what part of the country they were from. My grandparents were from Floyd County in Texas. They raised their children around that area. Now, on my daddy's side, it was the same thing because they knew each other as children. Their families were in the same uh, community there, and I can't recall the name of the community. The two families, the Austins and the Bullards, grew up together, and then they dated. My mother and my daddy dated, but then after they were married, I never really realized whenever we'd have a big family get together, there would be the Austins and the Bullards, and I never knew which uncles belonged to which side because there was Austin and John Bullard, and then there was Louis Austin and Louis Bullard. So those were the only two, but of all of them, I never knew whether it was my mother's or my daddy's brothers or sisters. And even in later years, after James and I were married, then whenever we'd have a family reunion, it would be primarily the Austins, but there would be numerous Bullards that would come to it. I'm saying I was married, and so therefore there would be these uncles and aunts, all these old people, you know, and they would all be there. And that was normally what's held in Lubbock. Mother and Daddy came to New Mexico when, for some reason, somebody in Mountain Air, and I do not know who it was, but they convinced Daddy that he could make a living there. Remember, this was in 1931. The Depression had started in 29, and it was so when they moved from Floyd County, Texas, they had my two older brothers. I was born shortly. They moved in February, and I was born in July. Okay. But when they moved, my mother had her two younger brothers that came with them to help corral the livestock and they moved lock, stock, and I'd never thought of that before, but they moved literally trailer loads of livestock. And I remember in some of Mother's writings where a trailer overturned and spilled out all these pigs and what have you. And one of the neighbors along the road took them in, and they spent a night while all of the neighboring men helped gather up the livestock. I was born in a half dugout in Tahiti, New Mexico. Now, this half dugout was the sleeping quarters, and then there was a shed room, the kitchen and living area that was built above ground, rough, mind you. The full dugout is where the entire living quarters, you have a mound of dirt, and it's dug out, and it's shored up with timber and the roof, but it is a cheap way of building living quarters. And so anyhow, I don't know how long we were there before my younger brother was born, maybe a year or so that we lived in this, in the dugout, half dugout. And then we moved to another house. But anyhow, what I was going to say was that this lady who was the wife of the farmer, she was the one that delivered me. And to this day, I have been friends. Her her daughter died just probably 3 months ago. We kind of lost touch through the years, but we reconnected several years ago. I had twin aunts on my daddy's side, Stella and Della. And so thankfully I wasn't named Della, but Stella was bad enough. Yeah. Anyhow, I was named for her. My daddy, oh my God, in this day and time, he would be a rich man because he was a go-getter. I mean, if there was any money to be made, Ed Bullard was going to, by hook or crook. When he came to New Mexico, he managed to get a threshing machine. He was a dryland bean farmer, and he thrashed beans. He was in the CCC. He ran the threshing machine. There were sawmills there in the Manzana Mountains. And part of the time he drove a truck working for a logging company. And so I'm sure he confiscated enough lumber to build a house. So I don't know. The water came from a well. Pretty sure we had electricity. However, I'm very familiar with lighting coal oil lamps, so possibly not. I don't remember having any fun. I don't remember a lot of my childhood, but I think I was helping mother take care of babies. She cooked, and I do not know how she did it, but she cooked for all of these Mexicans that Daddy had on the threshing crew, and I don't know how many there were, but every day she would cook a big pot of beans, big beans, and we never went hungry, but I do not remember what we had to eat, but I'm sure it was beans and tortillas because she had one Mexican girl helping her cook, and I'm sure that Becky probably made tortillas. Mother canned a lot. Anytime she could get her hands on any kind of fruit, she canned. I never milked. I never milked the cows. I do not remember doing anything outside, but somebody had to have help do the dishes and clean the house and make the beds and etc. And as the oldest girl, I'm sure when we moved into Mountain Air, I was less than 10 years old, but I can remember going up and taking care of this neighbor woman. I said, I think my folks just farmed me out to help the neighbors because I'm remembering taking care of this woman. She was probably dying of cancer. I do not know what, but they needed somebody because whoever the woman of the household worked during the day, and they needed somebody. And if this was like a couple of miles from our house, anyhow, I can remember taking care of her and emptying, pardon the expression, but emptying the slop jar and bringing her water and her food that the lady of the house had prepared before she left, taking care of her and washing the dishes and taking care of that household, sweeping and such. And I wasn't even 10 years old. And so I don't remember any fun things until I went to by the way, I started to school when I was 5 years old. I was 5 in July and started to school in September because the school district needed enough kids to get to have fill their quota for the first grade. It was definitely a little bitty school, Ewing Community School. But I can remember the recess and this like a cyclone fence. The girls played house in the corner of the yard, and then we played games, kick the can, Red Rover, various things. And I remember the auditorium. It had this large, like a canvas with a painting on it, and it rolled up. And the person who did the auctioneering for our pie suppers, that was a big thing once a year, that we had and it wasn't called a box supper, it was a pie supper. Mother always fixed my box, and we decorated it with crayons and ribbons and etc. And then the auction, it went to the highest bidder, and of course some old man always bought mine. Never a cute little boy. But then I remember about school days. I also remember Virgil Brown's lunchbox. Now, to anybody these days, this lunchbox would not have been important. The old kind of oval top that had a thermos in the top. Wow. Virgil Brown brought a lunchbox, and he even had a drink in the top of it, like lemonade or something. And he had a square sandwich made on square bread, and it was wrapped in wax paper. Wow. And then he always had a piece of fruit, whether it was an apple or an orange or a banana. Oh my God. And all of us kids, whether there was 5 or 6, I don't know how many, but anyhow, we were all quite envious of this little boy. And then another thing I remember about school is when I fell out, don't ask me what I was doing, climbing on a tractor, but I fell off and fell onto a disc. And I have to this day a scar about yay long, on my thigh. And heaven forbid that we would even consider taking me to an emergency room 60 miles away. No, 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 no. But they cleaned it with kerosene. Oh, yes. Now, let me tell you, this is it may be old wives' tale, but that was a cleaner, kerosene. But anyhow, the wrapping was torn up diapers that wrapped around my leg. And the kids teased me unmercifully about the fact that Stella's wearing diapers, Stella's wearing diapers. So I was a good student. I was a good speller. I won several spelling matches. And, that. I don't like math, and to this day, I get frustrated by math. I'm still one that has to, if I'm subtracting something, I have to cross out the number. So we went to First Baptist Church, and there in the Ewing community, the church was held in the schoolhouse, and I think there was a visiting preacher. I don't remember his name or anything. My daddy always led singing. He loved to sing, and I remember him teaching me to sing alto. To this day, I still sing alto, but he would say, Snooks, he would call me Snooks. He'd say, all you have to do is harmonize. And he would try, and I never got the hang of it until he said, sing shortening bread. And so when I was singing shortening bread, he said, that's the note right there. Just hold it and follow along. I mean, he literally taught me to harmonize, and then I didn't learn to read notes until later. Daddy was always gone. Mom was she worked. She worked housework with all these little kids and all the cooking and the chores. Daddy was off either thrashing, logging, CCC, what have you. Uh, he would come home periodically. I mean, but but I don't remember him being home very much. They were not affectionate. No, I knew they loved me, but how I knew, I don't remember them ever saying I love you. Not until uh, we were grown, and I don't think it came easily to them. And I don't remember them hugging me or anything like that. One of the things that she and Daddy would do would be to walk the streets, the curbs, pick up cigarette butts to for Daddy to open. Now he rolled his own cigarettes. He was a smoker deluxe, but by having all of this tobacco for free, hey, you know, depression again. I used to laugh at Mother saving balls of string and folding up aluminum foil and uh, smoothing out wax paper or the insides of cereal boxes where your wax paper comes from, and rolling that up. I thought, oh, that's okay. And to this day, I find myself, what can I use this for? What can I or wiping out the insides of plastic bags that have only had bread in them. No, I wash them and dry them. And my kids laugh at me and my grandchildren. Oh my God. But that all comes from having a mother that went through the Depression. Now, by 1945, when we moved to Anthony, that was the end of the war. The thing I remember is not necessarily except the ration books. Everything was rationed. I think it was Janice was asking us about when James was in high school and asked about the uh, basketball teams or football teams or such. No, there was no money to travel. No tires were rationed. Gas was thing. You didn't do that. And so therefore, when we went back to Floydada for family reunions or such, that was it was not only a big trip, but it was a big thing. Like I won't say vacation, but the nearest thing. I was 13 years old when we moved to Anthony, New Mexico. It was the middle of my freshman year. When we moved from Mountain Air to Anthony, and I accused James of the two mattress bits, but when we moved, there was my older brother, Don, and my baby sister, Norma, and mother and daddy. Now, mind you, this was a half-ton Ford pickup. Pickups were littler then. Our total household goods was in the back with stakes up on the side, and over the top of it was these two mattresses. 4 of us kids, me and George and Helen and Sherry, 4 of us was riding between those two mattresses from Mountain Air, New Mexico, 60 miles this side of Albuquerque, to Anthony, and we spent the night near Hatch, New Mexico. And I do not remember spending the night, but George, my younger brother, he says, "You don't remember spending the night?" He said, they put the two mattresses on now George is 2 years younger than I am. Said they put the two mattresses on the ground, and then Mother got out enough quilts to cover. It was in the middle of between the 2 semesters of school, so it had to have been in the winter time. See, I'm blessed with not being able to remember that, but George did. But I was horrified at the idea. I says, "Well, George, all 4 of us between those 2 mattresses?" He said, "Well, yes, we did." He said, "We were warm." I'm
My name is James Pritchett. I was born September the 1st, 1929. I was born in Marlton, Arkansas, and Daddy told me this when he had a nurse staying with Mama to have a baby, and he went down to the depot. He got in a crap game, and he won $5.25. And he come home and give it to the nurse. Well, I go back, Daddy told me that later in life that he finally made enough money to buy him a new hat. The wind come along and blew it off his head, and he caught it in Las Cruces, New Mexico. But the truth is Uncle John, Daddy's brother, offered him a job in Las Cruces, New Mexico. So he come out and worked for him for a while, and he made enough money to come back and pick his family up when I was 2-year-old. My whole family lived in Arkansas, and Daddy lived in Arkansas. Of course, there was no jobs. And I was born in Marlton, and he finally found a job by going to see his older brother, John, in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Daddy bought him a 8-cylinder Buick 1927, and he come to Arkansas to pick up his family. There was 8 people in that Buick. Of course, I didn't know anything about it. I was gone. I didn't know anything about it. And he made the trek back to Las Cruces. Somewhere on the line, they tell me that the solenoid went out on the Buick. But in the cars in those days, you cranked. He had a crank. And Daddy, my sister told me, says, I felt so sorry for Daddy. His hands was blistered before he, to keep that damn Buick running. But anyway, he had pulled a trailer with 2 mattresses on top of that trailer, and we were Arkies going to, not Okies, Arkies. He had a dog, and he built a box on the fender for this dog to ride. And so they started out, and it took him like 6 or 7 days to make it from Arkansas to Las Cruces. Somewhere around Hobbs, New Mexico, they spent the night, and the damn dog heard coyotes yelling. And so he took off, and we lost our dog. Of course, I didn't know anything about it. Then we moved to Las Cruces. At my earliest thing that I can possibly remember affecting my daddy's, we lived in Cruces, and he worked in a blacksmith shop in Canyontillo. It was 20 miles. He'd come home on Saturday, and he'd have to go back Sunday afternoon, go to work. And he brought kids all candy, but this is the only time, first I can remember he come home with candy and a kite, a bought kite. Not we made them ourselves. Then from there, I don't remember when we moved, but it was before I was started to school. We moved to Canyontillo, and we moved in a house there. But go back to Daddy. Daddy borrowed $100 from Mr. Lawrence to put in his own blacksmith shop. So back in those days, the farmers had plowshares. They didn't have any blacksmith for years, so Daddy he couldn't get any work. So he goes out to the farmers and gathers up these old plowshares that needed points on them. And he would go back to the blacksmith shop, and he'd weld in the forge a point, and he'd lay them out there with the farmer's name that was on them. First farmer he ever had, he says, George, he said, that's going to break. He said, you break it, and I'll buy it back off of you. So he put it on his plow, and he took off plowing, and he come back and brought him a pickup load of plowshares to point. And so that's when he started his blacksmith shop. The family lived in a little house right there by Canyontillo, pretty close. I had a brother that's two years younger than I was. I was probably 5 at the time, and he was 2.5. There's an irrigation ditch in front of the house there, and all the kids, we took Ralph and went over and waded in this irrigation ditch. Well, the way the irrigation works for farmers, you check the water up for those farmers, and then you go down here and check the water up for these farmers. So the day we went wading, the water was a foot deep. The next day at the same time, Ralph decided he wanted to go wading, and it was this deep, and he drowned. So that was my first indication. I had to learn quick what death was. I had no idea. When I started the school in a little town called Central, and I started at 6 years old, and we stayed there until I was probably 7 or 8. When I was three and a half, when I was in third grade halfway, we moved to Anthony. But back when I was working at Central, going to Central, one little story. Two widow women lived on a half mile from us. They had a beautiful house. They had the most beautiful wood stove I ever saw in my life with two ovens. And 4 o'clock every Wednesday afternoon, us kids would go up to there, and she had fresh baked yeast bread and butter and honey and jelly. My daddy found out about it, and he was fixing to tear my ass up. But he goes up there and talks to the two ladies, and the two ladies told him, he says, "Now, George, we're two old women, and those boys come up here at 4 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon." He says, "And don't you stop them." He says, "That's the only thing we have to do." He said, "We don't need the bread." He said, so that was one story. When I started the school, the first 3.5 years, I didn't know that you had to study. All us kids ever did was act and play. We put on about 10 plays in 2 years. One of them I had to learn to tap dance. Two favorite teachers. I learned my multiplication tables from Mrs. Humboldt Cassad, and how she taught us. I didn't care nothing about mathematics, but I'm a ball player. She put everybody, kids, in a circle, and she'd take this volleyball and she'd throw it at you and say, "What's 6 times 6? You answer 36 before you caught it. If you don't, you sit down." Many a time that she and I would be up there and I'd snap the answers at her, and that's where I learned my math. From there, I went 3.5 years. We moved to Anthony, to another shop, and my mother had come down with some type of blood, and she was sickly for about 15 years. I had two older sisters, and I had two older brothers, but by the time I started to school, my two older brothers was gone. They were out of high school and on their own. When Mama was sick, my Ollie and I did all of the outside work. George and Mildred, they did all the inside work. Now, those were the days that when you want to wash clothes, hot pot over there, black, you put your water in there and you build a fire around it. Daddy had bought Mama a square tub Maytag, and it sat outside. And you plug that thing in, and Ollie and I did all the outside work, colder than the damn blue blazes anyway. And George and Mildred did the inside work. We handled that pretty good. Finally, Daddy made enough money that he moved to about a mile from there to a house that had inside plumbing. We didn't have that for those years, but we'd had inside plumbing, and we slept on the back porch. I slept on the back porch. I don't know where we put all the kids, but we had a ton of them. We had a well, but this well was different than what people think of now. They drill 15 feet, they dug 15 feet hole in the ground and then drilled the well in the bottom. You had to pump down there. You can pump water a long ways, but you can't pull it. You could, under the perfect conditions, you can pull 29 feet. But we had to get that well down there that's close enough to the water. But we had that, and we had a tank 20 feet in the air. And we up there, and those years was better. Well, I either rode a bicycle or walked to school, which was a mile. One of the funnies that happened, and I built model airplanes, and we had this tank was 20 feet in the air, and so I had a double wing airplane that I put tape, crepe paper on this long, soaked it in diesel. I got up on top of this tank and I wound it rubber driven. I wound it and I lit this diesel and I throwed it. There were two ladies that were sitting over there in the back of the house, leaned up and seen this plane go and finally just take off to the ground and crash. But I thought it was quite funny. I didn't know those women was over there, and it wouldn't make no difference. Boy, it wasn't but 15 minutes. Here come the fire truck, here come the police, here come everybody going off. And Daddy come home. I told Daddy, I said, Daddy, I believe I made a mistake. He said, what do you mean? I said, what are those people doing out there? And he said, there's an airplane, a crop duster, caught fire and went down. I said, would you go out there and tell those people that was me? He said, what'd you do? I said, I throwed a double-wing airplane on fire out. He didn't whip my butt, but when I was, when I'm from the 3rd grade to the 7th grade, I was a sickly kid, and I got 3 different kinds of measles, the whooping cough, but I developed rheumatism. They did not call it rheumatoid arthritis. That come years later. But I got so stiff I could not turn over. And my sister Mildred was skinny, and I didn't want her to turn me over because her little skinny arms hurt. But Ollie would turn me over back this way and then back this way. And for some reason I got over it. I don't know how. But my sickliness, when I was 13, I had already missed half a year of school. I couldn't pass because of participation. So Daddy took me deer hunting at 13. I'm out of school. So we went deer hunting. My daddy was a teetotaler. He didn't drink nothing. So we got up there and we went out hunting. Of course, about the 2nd day we went out hunting, it come snow and it rained and it cold and some more snow and rain. So when I come back into the camp, they cooked supper and everybody eat, and I was still shaking. I had about 105 fever. So Daddy told me, he says, well, as quick as I eat supper, I'll take you home, son. So I've got a cousin the same age as my daddy, but he's a cousin. And he looked over at me, and he left the tent and went outside. He come back in a little bit with a half a Coke. He said, here, drink it. I said, drink it. So I drank it. And he goes out a little while later, and he comes back in with another half coat. And I drank it. So in a little bit, he reaches back and gets the skillet and puts it on our stove. And Daddy says, "Joe, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm going to feed that boy right just as quick as I can get it cooked." Before he gave me that coat, I had my raincoat on. Couldn't take it off. But anyway, he knocked that flu out. From then on, I never let that fever get to me anymore because a hot toddy would nail it. That particular hunt, I would follow anybody that carried the pistol because I'm going to shoot squirrels. But Daddy forgot his glasses, and I followed Daddy this day. Snow was on the ground. Beautiful, beautiful. And he and I was walking around. I reached over and got Daddy and pulled him up against a tree. And I said, "Daddy, the 7 bucks is coming down that fence row." And he had a 25-35. We didn't have those 25-35s. And that was all we had to shoot. So he'd shoot, and I said, "Too high, Daddy, low. Shoot, boom, too high, Daddy. Boom, too high, Daddy. Boom, damn it, get down." Anyway, we would not walk the fence line, and there wasn't an ounce of blood nowhere, and he didn't shoot him. So that night we was in camp. My cousin Joe says, "Well, damn it, George, why didn't you shoot a little lower?" He says, "Why didn't I hand that gun to that 13-year-old? And he said, "We'll still be cleaning deer." When I was a 12-year-old, I made Eagle Scout. I had 32 merit badges. I only needed 21 merit badges for an eagle. Now, that's another funny, my daddy. My daddy didn't talk politics. He didn't talk the rent, the cost of nothing. When it come for the court of honor, my daddy didn't show up. Hell, I was the 7th kid down. He was an old man, and he worked hard. So I learned this later. After I got married, my older brother went to the military, and he come home and finished his scout work, and he made an eagle. Daddy was the MC of the Court of Honor for him, and he MC'd the Code of Honor for every Scout Court of Honor from there as long as the troop was alive. Daddy was a quiet man. He never said "I love you" at all, and he had 2 arguments in my life with my mother. And they were very short and sweet. One of them, we were killing hogs. And my brother George and I talked Daddy into letting us stick this hogs and not shoot it. So we stuck it and cut the jugular vein, and that pig was going screaming, going around and around. Mama walked right up by my daddy's face, and she says, "George, there won't be no more of that." And sure enough, there was not any more of that. Square-shouldered German lady, and very fair. And she was pregnant 99 months, because 11 kids. She never showed any love to speak of like we do now. But she was a good mother. Took good care of him. Before I found out that you could kill the flu with alcohol, I've drank enough mineral oil to float a down battleship. My daddy was a successful farmer. When we moved over to the 4 acres, we raised 400 chickens a year, and we killed these chickens and separated them out between all of the kids. And we raised 6, 8 hogs, and we sugar cured our own hams and bacons, and we had a big crock. And Mama would cook this sausage halfway, not all the way, halfway, and she'd put it in this crock, cover it with grease, another layer, and cover it with grease, and another layer, and cover it with grease. Now we got sausage for the whole year. I had 2 milk cows. When I was in high school, I took dairy judging, and we had to go out to the house and look 8 cows over, then go back to school. Well, the coach drove up into my yard, and I run in the house and talked to Mama. So I talked to him. We got ready to go. Coach says, "Jim, you better look them cows over. You're going to have to judge them tomorrow." I said, "I happen to know those cows, so I milk them every damn morning." And my brother, 2 years older than me, he was smart like a fox. He never did learn to milk. Daddy come to see me when I was farming, and I had killed a hog at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He says, "Son, I thought I taught you better than that." I said, "Daddy, I swore to God if I ever got out from under your roof, I'd never kill a hog on the coldest blue northern in the world." But see, he had to have that blue northern in order to save his meat. He says, "But you're going to lose that meat." I said, "No, I'm going to put it in the cooler, 42 degrees. Between my junior and senior year, I got good enough at the blacksmith shop that Daddy paid me on a commission, just like he would a grown man. And I was making $30 and $40 a day. And I was going to buy me a new car. That didn't cost me $1,800 back in those days. So I did that until June 7th. I fell over on the floor with appendicitis. So he carried me to the hospital, and they operated on me. And just as he took the appendix out of me, they ruptured. They come out with a new drug at that time, sulfur powder. So doctor sewed that sulfur powder in there and sewed me up. That's what they was doing overseas for everybody that got hurt. And I don't remember how much I paid, but I paid the doctor bill, and Daddy paid the hospital bill. And in those days, we didn't deal with nothing but cash. And my daddy was held on that cash. My daddy passed on to me the ability to save. And when I was 12-year-old, he hired me and gave me $5 a week. Then he made me show him a deposit slip for $2.50 to put in the bank. He said, "There ain't nobody needs no kid needs $2.50 for a week." My first car was a 1928 Model A Ford. It was in a wreck. My brother-in-law hit it with a Studebaker, and I bought it for $75. The fenders back in those days, you could take a hammer and put them back out. So I straightened it all up, and I overhauled the motor. My daddy had one of his nephews was working for him until he got enough money to go to California. And he only had one hand, the other one cut off right here. So he helped me overhaul this motor, and that's where I began to learn a little bit about mechanics first day that he helped me on that motor, we went over to the lavatory over there, and I grabbed the water and some soap and a dish wash rag. I said, "Here, Bill, let me have your hand." And I washed his hand for him, and he was almost in tears. He said, "You're the only person that's ever washed my hand for me." I said, "Well, how do you? I can't see how you do it, but you did." I think I'm a better Boy Scout than anything else. And because the Boy Scout oath, when I was there, it was to do your duty to God and your country, helping other people at all times, keeping myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. I had a Mexican Boy Scout troop when I lived in Anthony. I made Citizen of the Year because I'd taken all my time and this and that and the other. In 1960, I come home, and I looked up half mile over here, and this house just blew up. Why I drove my car over there, I'll never know. But then the good Lord takes care of people like that. I drove my car over there, and this Mexican family had run out of butane in the tank, and he drove a tractor up there, and he took the tubing off of the butane. There's a regulator that drops it down to like 4 ounces of pressure, and he puts it up here on his tractor, and it's got 100 pounds of pressure. There were 7 people, and I loaded them in my car that was burnt to a crisp. They were hurting bad. 2 of them died. One of them, Tencia, she's still living. She asked me one day when I hunted her up so I could talk to her after we were grown. Said, "Do you remember picking me up and putting me in that big old white car?" And I said, "No." She said, "You put one hand here and one under my legs and handle it." She'd burnt to a crisp. But anyway, when I went through town, I lived 100 miles from El Paso, 100 miles from Van Horn, 100 miles from Carlsbad. The Catholic priest was there, and I stopped on the corner, and I told him, I said, "Father Casey," "Yeah." I said, "Call El Paso and get me an escort. I'm headed to the hospital." And I picked up Winnie Hughes. I said, she only hypochondriac I knew. So I said, "Winnie, get me all the damn pain pills you got and let's go." So we did. I made that 100 miles in 56 minutes. I got them to the hospital. The mother and the 14-year-old died. And the rest of them, Tencia, she's still living. The good Lord was real nice to her. Her face and her hands weren't burnt. So she just wore long sleeves. And I asked her, I said, "You was burnt all over." She rolled up her sleeves. She said, "Oh, yeah." He said, "But my face don't." I graduated from high school. I was in the top 10% in mathematics, and my wife was in the top 10% in English Lit. And I didn't like it. The only trouble I had in school was history, because I didn't like history. My little wife moved to Anthony in January, halfway through the school year when I was freshman. And I took to her, and she took to me. 3.5 years later, when I graduated from high school, I graduated on Thursday night and got married the next Tuesday.
Because I started school early and he flunked a couple of years. He was held back. He said it was because they set the schoolhouse on fire. And I questioned him. Well, no, we didn't really set it on fire. We were just we had tried, and we were in so much mischief and etc. that he was deliberately separated from this other good influence, etc.
I can tell you exactly the first time I saw it. We rode a school bus from the middle of Anthony 3 miles to high school, and she moved down in the January. The year's halfway gone. So I was already on the school bus when she walked in. And that was the exact day that I met her.
Well, I kind of thought that guy was kind of cute, but getting on the school bus, and he's to this day he swears he thought it was Model Pack, but he flipped me on the butt as I'm going up the school steps, and that was the start of it. Anyhow, we went to the same church. Now there at Anthony, that was a more structured church. In fact, I don't remember much about the Mountain Air Church. But there at Anthony, we went to church regularly, 3 or 4 times a week, seems like. Yeah, we went on Wednesday night, and Mother was very active, probably in the nursery, because Norma was of that age. And James and I were very active in the youth group.
From then, we was girlfriends, boyfriends. Daddy had a 3/4 ton truck, flatbed, Pritchett's blacksmith shop on the back, and he's real nice. I could have it anytime I wanted to go dating. We didn't have no car, so all of our dating was in this big old truck. She was in a singing group, the Sextets, and they wear their evening gowns, and she always had grease right here on this leg, because she'd sit over here. That old truck was 4 on the floor. And we laughed about that.
We had a group called the 16s. One word, 16s. We were quite popular. We were called on to perform at various places. We sang a cappella, and it was, if I do say so, it was pretty darn good. By that time, I was, quote, old enough to date, and this little Pritchett boy would pick me up, and our courting vehicle happened to be his truck, the Pritchett blacksmith truck, stick shift. Well, naturally, I would scoot over. You got to scoot over. So I always had grease on this side of my formals, because we were in formal wear, and we looked good. When we were in training union, which is another name for
the night service.
Yeah. Our teacher, Clarence Stringer, who I used to babysit for his kids, anyhow, he was our teacher, and he was always full of bright and innovative ideas. Like, we'd go to other churches to see how they worshiped, much to our parents' dismay, etc. But he had the bright idea, okay, we're going to, in our scrapbook, we are going to write a letter of prophecy. We will open these 10 years from now. And so I think that particular night, there was only about 6 of us in the training union. We all wrote not only a letter to ourselves, but for each of the other people there. But anyhow, in my letter to James, I had wrote, remember James Pritchett. You know he's the only one I'll ever honestly love, I do believe, but if I ever learn to love anyone else, at least I hope not, I'm sure, though, that he'll never be as nice to love as he is. And then I said, may it be God's will to find you the wife. This is a letter I wrote to myself. May it be God's will to find you the wife of James Pritchett with one or two little children with his eyes and your hair. Remember how James used to love to stroke your hair and say it was like gold, etc., etc. And also the first time he ever kissed you. In fact, it was the first time you'd ever been kissed by any boy. And there's more, but that was basically my letter to myself. So are you ready to read yours?
Stella Pritchett, 10 years from now, you will have changed your last name to, I hope, Pritchett. No matter what the beautiful letter may lead, so will follow. You will be an active church member and be real like Christian. I'll be as happy as ever. I'll bet that the guy that gets your will be a great guide. He will work hard and let her have her everything that she wants, or at least I would I would care within you my moments, but never. I'll be all yours and would always be for the one and only one reason. I love you, James. Those three words did not come from the Pritchett side of the family. They come from her and her sisters. And my family never used that word, but I learned to say it. And when I talk to my boys, I tell them I love them. I talk to them, end up kind of phone conversations. I tell you I love them. I worked on my sister, youngest sister, 3 years before I could get her to say I love you. And when she finally said it, I said, see there, sis, it don't hurt. When I got this cochlear hip, I was borderline as to whether it was going to give it to me and the insurance pay for it. Well, I couldn't pay for it the other way. So the lady says, well, just why would you like to hear a better? I said, lady, I got 15 great grandkids. If one of my great grandkids says, Papa, I love you, by God, I want to hear it. She said, you're okay, send it through.
We have raised wonderful children.
Well, I went to work as a blacksmith for Joe. Then he didn't have enough work, so I moved in with my brother. Well, my brother paid me $40 a week, and I was making $30 a day for Daddy. And her daddy come along and offered me a job. So I took it, and we moved to Dell City, farming 2,000 acres. Dell City was a boom town. Bud Merrill, Boyles, Chandler, and White, 4 millionaires, wanted to drill for oil. They could cost them $14 and a half for the mineral rights, and it only cost them $15 an acre for the land. So they bought 400,000 acres. They drilled. All they could hit was water. So, but this water is not everywhere. You can drill a well right here and move over. This well is 2,000 gallons a minute. You can go 20 feet over yonder and drill another and be a dry hole. It was in rock fissures. Okay. They hit water and they began to set it off. And so people moved out there because cotton was up here. Labor was 75 cents an hour for Bracero Mexicans, and a tractor was here. So we farmed until the price went here and the tractor went up here. I never wanted to be a big farmer. I wanted to own a good quarter section of land that would make enough money to live comfortably. It didn't happen. I farmed for 19 years. I got 5 hails and a flood. And I finally decided, cut the rope, that's enough.
I want to go back to when we first married. Okay, we were living at La Mesa, working for his cousin Joe. Anyhow, there's 2 incidences. I was young, just married. James is working here at the shop, and I, being bored, I walked down to the shop that afternoon. Well, a woman in the blacksmith shop was just unheard of. And so I stepped in the door, and here are these 2 old drunks, Rube Hawes and Forrest Hull. And one of them looks at me and he says, Forrest, don't you think it's about time we go get a Coke? Coke? Hell, that's what I want, a goddamn Coke. And so that's what James will say when Coke.
These 2 guys, Forrest Hull and Rube Hawes, every afternoon would go have a drink. Okay, but they would take Joe with them, and Joe was an alcoholic. He couldn't have a drink and go to the house. He'd go ahead and got drunk. So I got my nerve up high enough that I decided I was going to tangle with them. So they come in, and I told them what I thought of them. I told them, for God's sakes, if you 2 wanted to drink, leave Joe alone. And I let them have a piece of my mind. 2 days later, I heard from a different farmer that Rube Hawes went to every farmer in La Mesa and told them, he said, if you want to drink, don't you take Joe with you. You leave the man alone. And I said, well, that's pretty dang nice.
So I'm driving, going over to Anthony, to my mother's house to do the laundry. And Jimmy, I have him tied down somewhere, because Lord only knows we didn't have baby seats. But here's this basket of diapers in the front. Okay, so I'm driving along with the windows down, no air conditioning, and these roads are they're what, only 3 or 4 feet higher than the field.
Ditch. Yeah.
Anyhow, I'm driving along and a diaper blows up in front of my face and I sail out. And it probably wasn't over 20 feet in the middle of this cotton field, freshly irrigated. Me with a baby, a screaming baby. I do not know how I got out of there, but nevertheless.
She reached over and got her diapers and quit driving. It put her out in the 4 wheels.
Out in the cotton field, and I just sunk. But anyhow, I'm raising Jimmy and raising Kenny, and pretty soon Roger, and I guess we had all 4 kids by then.
No, when we
I
first
had
started?
4 children in less than 6 years, so if that doesn't tell you pretty much what I was doing.
When we moved to Dale City, we had no electricity, no natural gas, and no telephone. And she and I moved into the biggest house out there.
Oh, yeah.
But we had
had an indoor bathroom.
Yeah, we had a windmill for water. Wasn't about 2 weeks later, I was in the field running my tractors, and one of my good friends, or I met him, good friends later on in life, but I met him this day. He come out there and he says, stuck his hand out, and he said, "My name's John Gentry." He said, "I live a mile down here on the right from the center of town." He said, "Saturday night, come on down to the house. We're going to have an ice cream party." So I introduced myself and I started back to work. John walked back to his truck. I said, "How in the hell does he plan on having an ice cream party 100 miles from any ice? No electricity, no nothing." So come Saturday night, we didn't have nothing to do. And I said, "Let's go down and see John." We go down there and he's got 3 hand crank freezers with water in them and a butane tank over here bubbling butane in that water, just bubbling and it'll freeze. And he cranked that thing up and we had three 6-quart freezers full of ice cream, and everybody out there was there. I said, "Well, I learned something." He said, "Well, just get the fumes away," and he said, "It tastes real good." History repeats itself. So I knew that somewhere in the next 19, 20 years, we're going to get the same thing. And I worked 19 years and lost it one day. So I decided to move. I was working for the city and running an electrodialysis water machine, purifying the water from 2,000 parts per million down to 1,000 parts per million. And then I finally decided that I was getting my business with production credit and everything around where I could leave with nothing, but at least I didn't have to go bankrupt. I took off one day in the car and told her I'm going to go find a job. I applied for 7 jobs, got 5 of them. And I moved to here in September the 1st, 1969. We played polo for 7 years.
Quite a long time, honey.
And I played goalie for Dell City and for the 2 years world champions. It's cowboy polo with a rubber ball, and you played in 5 zones. The center, 2 more zones, and then the goal, 2 more. And you played it on quarter horses. Then the flood hit, and that tore everything up. Before I moved to Dell City, I was scoutmaster for a little Mexican troop. Then I moved to Dell City, and I started the scout program and was scoutmaster for the kids there. Never was I ever asked by anybody, "Do you want to be a scoutmaster?" No, that never happened. I took it upon myself to save this little Mexican troop, and I took it upon myself to start the scout troop. And when I moved down here, I told her, I said, "If you tell anybody that I've been working with the kids, either scoutmaster or Little League Baseball for 13 straight years," I said, "I'm going to nail you." But I love my kids, and I wanted to pass on what I could, but I never did farm to try to be a millionaire. That wasn't what I wanted. Well, out there is a lot different. I moved down here, and because of all the jobs over here on the plants.
Don't forget that you had you no longer were farming that 2,000 acres.
No,
by that time we had bought like 400 acres to where I
quit my daddy-in-law. You work 16 hours a day, and on Sunday you still got 16 more hours to work. I mean, you can't stop if you're farming that much land. My daddy never watched me play a game of football. My kids never saw me miss. If they played in something, or I was there. If we had to drive 200 miles to get involved in what our kids was doing, we did it.
But what was difficult was we had three boys on different little league teams. So, and they had to get the milking done, before we could go to the games, etc. And so mother took on the job of scorekeeper. That way all I paid attention to was the scores. I could not stand to see this one playing that one, and out. Yeah.
I went to work for the city of Hitchcock, and I was applying for the water and sewer job.
Because he had his double A.
They hired me on as street superintendent. So I handled that, and then going my way, and all of a sudden the water was stinking. You couldn't drink it. The water and sewer superintendent that we had, they come to me and says, "Can you clean this water up?" I said, "Oh, hell yeah." I didn't know what they were talking about. The mayor, he says, "I made it, Jim. Can you do it?" And I said, "You give me 5 days, and by God, it'll be in good shape." "All right." He says, "You're my water and sewer superintendent and the head of the street department." I said, "Good." Next morning, they fired Mr. Purdy, and he left. Next morning, I went out to the water department. And I said, "Pete, you and John." John had worked with the water system for 17 years. It used to be a mud, but now it's a city. I said, "Y'all get out there and flush my fire hydrants for me." And John says, "You going to give us a list of how to flush?" I said, "Damn it, John, you've been here 17 years. You know what the hell to do." He said, "Okay." They all laughed. They laughed. What I learned later, that Mr. Purdy wrote down this plug, this plug, this plug, this plug, and he didn't know how to do it. So then later on, they come to me and he says, "We want you to be take over as director of public works." So I told the mayor, I said, "Mayor, you don't want me to be director of public works." "Oh, yes, we do." I said, "All right." I said, "But remember one thing." I said, "I'm headed out to the police department in the morning. And I'm going to fire every son of a bitch out there." Well, he said, "We can't." I said, what I told you." Well, he said, "You're going to be director of public works, but you can't touch the police department." I said, "That suits the hell out of me." So when I moved here in 69, I put my application in all of these plants. Well, along come Gerald Ford, and Gerald Ford passed a good law. He says that you cannot discriminate against a man on account of his age. So, step forward. I was going after my state A water license, and I had one commissioner. I had told him earlier that I want you to help me get a job. He was a shift foreman at Carbide. I said, "I want you to help me get a job at Carbide." So I didn't know what all this happened. I went to A&M, stayed there a week to take my state A water license, and I got them. There's only 140 state A water licenses in the state of Texas. So you're pretty high on the totem pole. She called me on Sunday and says, "You got an interview at Carbide Tuesday." So I went to work at Carbide. I was the highest paid individual in the city of Hitchcock. And I went out there for the lowest paid operator they had for a real good increase in salary. But I had to put in a year of apprentice school. 3 years of apprentice school to work my way up to full pay. At the end of my first year, they come out and said, we're going to top your pay up to full operator. You still have to fill out the paperwork.
When we first moved here, I worked over at Gibson's for 5 years in the bookkeeping department. But when he got on at Carbide, and by that time we had just about finished up on remodeling this house, when I said it was a pot house, and Janice corrected me and said a crack house, but no, it was it had been vacant for 2 or 3 years, and the teenagers used it as a hangout, and all of the windows were broken out there. There was 18 windows that we replaced. James was working for the city when he drove by, and this was after he became director of public works and stepped up in authority. Okay, we got to do something about that house. But also another thing was that it had been a heavy rainstorm, and this corner out here was not flooded. All of Hitchcock was flooded except for this little area right here. Light bulbs go off. Okay, that'd be a good property to buy. When he was ordered to straighten it up, then Julius had come by and was boarding up the windows, and then James stopped him from driving the nails in the window facing, and that started the, do you want to buy this property? Yes, and I've got so much money, da da da. Would you give 7,000 for it? Yeah, So Julius arranged for the Julius Carlton, our benefactor, arranged to go through his credit union and buy the property in his name, and then we paid him off. And so therefore, for $7,000, we bought the corner lot.
When I moved here, I told her if I could go to 65 and have a house paid for and a boat, that's all I want. Well, I passed that a long time ago.
I never dreamed that nearly 50 years later, we would still be living. I didn't think we was going to be living, to tell the truth. And then I decided, well, my God, we don't owe anybody anything. If we can't live on his salary at Carbide, there's something wrong with us old people that, the kids are all gone. If we can't make it on one salary, there is definitely something wrong with our mentality. So I quit work. And that lasted, I think I quit in February, and that lasted through the summer. Man, I had flower beds and all that kind of stuff, and I was bored silly. So I put in my application over at the school district as substitute teacher. And so I worked the next probably 20 or 30 years as substitute teaching. But I ended up working maybe 3 or 4 days a week at either the kindergarten or at the Stewart Elementary or at the high school or at Crosby Junior. I got to know all of the kids, and I thoroughly enjoyed it because you could see these common traits in families, Oh, here's a kindergartner. Lordy, he looks just like his brother in the 3rd grade and just like that junior high student, thinking they're going to be just exact. Oh, I hope the hell he's better behaved than so anyhow. So then I ended up, well, I worked also at the tax office. I worked various places around. I mean, once you get your name on a substitute teacher list, you're going to end up working everywhere. And so the school district also was the tax office, and that led to working down there quite a bit at the tax office. And then my daughter and her husband had bought into Armstrong McCall, which was a beauty supply uh, wholesale over here in what is now Gulf Center. Well, in fact, Armstrong McCall still is there. So I worked with them for 7 years. I enjoy everywhere I have ever
Let me
worked.
let me add
And
one
then,
back to her first going to work at Gibson's. Okay, she had to take a lie detector test, and
well, honey,
so she was taking this lie detector test, and the police was giving her to her, and this and that and the other, and they says, "Have you ever been bonded?" She said, "Yes." $10,000? Yes. $20,000? Yes. $50,000?
that was the
Yes.
Del City gin when I,
Then the old boy just folded it up and he said, "How much were you bonded for?" And she said, 300,000. She was selling cotton, working for the gin, selling cotton to the farmers.
yeah. And so then, after they decided to get out of the business, then I started, well, hell, I'm bored again, you know. I started volunteering, and I started with the Sunshine Shop because it's a retail uh, thrift shop, and it's part of United Way. And so I worked there 3 days a week and thoroughly enjoy it.
For many years, many years.
The average age of the volunteers at that place is 80 years old. There are two of us. Well, Pat is 91 and I'm 90. And then we have some 70-year-olds. But anyhow, that's where we are today. Oh, but I have through the years I have uh, had beautiful yard. I used to periodically win the garden of the month, you know, not can't do it too often, etc.
I put in 20 years at Carbide, from
Yeah.
45 to 65. I've been 27 years retired.
He retired in 95.
I worked 20 years and I averaged working 500 hours of overtime. And they put in the Carbide savings program. You could put your money in Carbide stock and keep it 1 year, and we put it in for a 10% discount. And 1 year later, well, then it went from there. And I bought stock for 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. I was out there one night and it got up to 95.60, and I sold them. Every damn bit of it. Since I retired, no, I don't work for nobody. I go fishing if you want to. We'll go play golf.
This book solves all arguments. It starts way back in 1976 with which one of the grandchildren was born, such and such, so and so. Okay, in 2012, James was diagnosed with prostate cancer. May the 28th, Helen died. July, we went to Wilmington, South Carolina, and Myrtle Beach. In August, Stella had a heart attack. October, we went to Kitts both seasons. November 23rd, James Davis Pritchett was born. See, all of these things are itemized. But anyhow, Grego died in 14. And so, but I get the two confused. But anyhow, anything when in doubt, I write it down. But I have not learned to watch movies we have. Last year, we got this big, quote, fancy TV. It's not as big as most people's, but nevertheless, it was big to us. And Roger or Janice, somebody insisted we install Netflix and Prime and, all of the movie channels. Well, since then, we've hardly watched regular TV at all.
We don't watch none of it.
But anyhow, we will see a movie on, we'll say Netflix, and James will say, have we watched that? And I'll say, I don't think so. So we're halfway through it before we realize that, yeah, we've seen this, but neither one of us can remember how it ends. So therefore, we go ahead and watch.
I played lots of golf. I got 5 holes in one.
Yeah, and he has 2 of them documented.
The first one, the pro told me, says, give me that ball and I'll have it bronze for you. I says, if you think I hit a good ball on that hole, you crazy. That was a water ball I shot. I got pretty good. Now, Roger, he still plays golf, and he's damn good. He's getting real good. When I was chief operator of Building 11, I played with my operators. I come in one day, and I had this thumb taped up. It was like this. One of my operators says, Tim, let's go play golf Saturday. Let's go play golf Saturday. So we got out there, and on the second hole, he told Tim, he says, forget it. I said, what's that? He said, that damn thumb is bleeding, and he don't care anymore. He can still hit.
I used to exercise over at the college, and was always in the dance classes, dance for exercise, or dance for heart. And I used to compete with the walking. When James was working at Carbide, I used to walk of a morning down past where is Baywood Foods out Main Street out to the Carbide Park and meet him on his way, home from work. That was a regular morning walk.
Jimmy.
I know something special. He's the only one that ever had grandchildren.
Oh, his name come from me and her daddy, James, and her daddy was Edward.
I always tease him and say, you're the only person that ever had grandchildren. Right? And he's
a lieutenant colonel.
Air Force.
He would go in to work for civil service and didn't even change desk. He just same people doing the same job. He come down here and we was loading a bus up to take a church trip. And one of the guys said, Jimmy, hand me that package. And he picked it up and he told me, he says, you tell me what to do. I'm not Obama. I am trainable.
Kenny lived in Fort Huachuca. That's where he transferred from Pensacola. I don't remember which hurricane it was that wiped out the Pensacola Marine Base. He transferred to Fort Huachuca, and then he retired there. He's not exactly retired from his second job, but because of COVID and etc. So, and they have one son.
And Roger's after Kenneth.
He is a brilliant person. He's the artist in the group. He has worked for Industrial Material till he retired last year. I don't think there's anything that boy cannot do with his hands.
The only funny one I can tell you on Roger and Kenneth, we were farming, they were just young boys, and they got out of bed and had a fight. They went out to do the chores and they had a fight. They went down to catch the bus and they had a fight. First recess at school, they had a fight. And another one at noon, they had a fight. So they come home and they was out, and they had another fight. And I come in and she says, she's crying. She said, the boys fought all day long. He said, I want you to do something. I said, I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it right now. So I jerked my belt off and started out there where them two boys are. They stopped. I said, oh, no. You've been playing all day. Wow, by God, fight. Now, I mean, fight. One of them would slow up. I'd pop him, the other would slow up. And after a while, I thought they'd had enough. I reached over and got them. I jerked them apart. And I said, all right, boys, you had enough? Roger says, no, Daddy. Let me catch my breath. I haven't got my good lick in yet. And so rather than me laugh, I turned around and went to the house. They never had another fight long. She's my girl, and I've always wanted one. She could do no wrong. The only time I ever popped her is she got in the middle of the floor and was throwing a fit. She looked at the fit, and she looked over at me, and she looked back and throwing that fit, and I jerked that belt off and popped it across her ass. She didn't believe her daddy would do anything like that.
I realized that here we are talking about how we, quote, beat our kids, how you took your belt off, etc. I guess in this day and time, you would be serving time for cruelty or what have you.
I don't really care. My sister Ollie told me one day, she says, James, don't you ever whip one of your kids when you're mad? And I said, what are you talking about, sis? He said, you might. I said, I'm not a damn fool. What's wrong with you? I said, you thinking I'm going to that mad enough to hurt one? No. But they know better to make Daddy mad.
In the farming there in Dell City, we used to get together and play cards. Well, we had to because the guys needed to change the irrigation tubes every 4 hours or 6 hours or what have you. So we have to have a way to stay awake. So we're playing cards. We'll have a double 8 people playing cards because it's time for so-and-so to go change the water and so-and-so. So it's just a way to stay awake. However, whenever those kids got to acting up in the other room, it didn't matter which one of us, mothers or fathers, all we had to do was go to that door.
Straighten up.
They did straighten up. They were good kids.
When I went to work at Carbide, the first thing on the evening shift at 11 o'clock, everybody wanted to go to the bar. I said, no, I ain't going to go to the bar. I'm going home. The Lord sent one angel down to see us when we were kids. And this angel worked for the Lord for about 3 or 4 years and went out with the Lord and just throwed everything in, says, I quit. So he sent me another one. Now, I don't know how many he sent, but I still got me a guardian angel up there somewhere taking care of me and helping.
We're going to get low down and dangerous now. I didn't realize how much I used my hands. A flip on the butt. Yep. And I don't want this. I don't. No, is he not recording this? I never know whether it's on or not. Other thing.
If you love their mother, you'll raise those kids right.
Other thing.
They're not gonna.
You're gonna let me say this.
We don't need that button heads. I give this woman a 243 pre-60 Winchester bolt action. It's now
Whoopie-doo.